Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're going to start a new series of videos really breaking down the anatomy of certain types of bass structure. I think this is going to be a lot of fun because every single type of structure, whether it's points, humps, saddles, bluff walls, ledges, any type of bass structure really has some key ingredients and some key spots that you need to pay attention to be able to maximize your success and find that little sweet spot. So we're going to start with bluffs today because it's kind of relevant to the season, because bluff walls are like some of my favorite types of structure for wintertime bass fishing. And the reason why I love bluff walls this time of year is because they're so vertical, and the fish don't have to travel very far to make depth changes while still relating to that structure. You know, if you have a point, the shoreline, you know, where the structure meets the surface is way over here. So if a fish is in 20 foot of water, he doesn't just travel 20 foot up that structure. He travels, you know, however far it takes to get to the bank. But with a steep vertical structure like a bluff wall, all they have to do is make a 20-foot change. So it really optimizes their ability to, not waste energy when their metabolism is already really slow. So anyways, so what makes a bluff a bluff? You know, what makes this type of vertical structure? So essentially, most bluffs are going to be found on reservoirs. So man-made reservoirs that once were just rivers and creeks winding through an area. And, you know, you will find some natural lakes that have bluffs. You know, for instance, Clear Lake comes to mind. I know there's some bluffs on Clear Lake. Champlain definitely has some bluffs. I've never fished one of the bluffs. It's usually, you know, on the run down to Ticonderoga or something like that. But in general, bluff banks are kind of exclusive to man-made reservoirs. Okay, and essentially what they are is when you have a creek channel or a main river channel winding through an area, oftentimes, you know, it's gonna find different bottom compositions, so different types of rocky areas, and so it's going to be winding through, and occasionally it's going to wind or you know, turn right into an area that has a bunch of really hard sediment, so really hard rock. And when water meets that really hard rock, it tends to erode down instead of into that hard rock. So it starts eroding at the softer material around it, at the edge of it. And so you get these bluff walls that get exposed. You get these steep banks. And these bluff walls are great for things like crawfish, insects, and in turn, all the different, prey species or predator species come in to feed on them. But they're also really good for pelagic type of bait fish too, like shad, because the shad are following the current on this creek channel or river channel, and they butt up against this wall, and it's a really good place for the bass to corral, you know, those shad. So anyways, that's how bluffs are kind of made. I'm no geologist, so that wasn't a very scientific explanation, but that's just kind of the gist of it. All right, so let's get into some of the key areas you want to look for on a bluff bank. The very first type of area that you want to focus on a bluff is probably something you hear a lot from pros if you're listening to them talking about bluffs, and that is the bluff ends. Essentially what you have, the bluff ends are on either end of where the bluff meets the creek channel. Okay, so you have the sloping contours out here. We'll just, we'll use this. So you got sloping contours out here where the contour lines aren't very, you know, close together. It's just gradually sloping, but then you meet this very steep bank here. Okay, so it's where the vertical structure meets the more horizontal structure. And that happens on both ends on every single bluff. Sometimes bluffs are longer, sometimes they're very short. It just depends on how long that creek channel, you know, butted up against that hard, you know, area on the bottom. And so these two areas right here, these bluff ends are going to be the key location you want to focus in on first. Obviously, you can only fish one at a time. So I usually will start well before a bluff end, fish my way to the bluff end. A lot of times the fish are going to be right here on the drop, and then I'll make sure to fish the other one. You never want to leave a bluff wall without fishing a bluff end if you can help it. So these are really good, and the great thing about a bluff end is that you can actually fish it with different techniques that you can't fish on the most vertical part of the structure. Things like shallow diving crankbaits, if it's shallow enough, medium or deep diving crankbaits. You can throw a Carolina rig. There's a lot of different things that you can do on the bluff ends that you can't do on the vertical structure, because here you can actually touch the bottom with those techniques. But once you get away from the bluff ends, you start getting to the more vertical stuff. There's some other things to look for. The first thing you want to look for is points and pockets, okay? So points are really good if you've got a lot of structure or a lot of current coming down. Say the current's coming down this way. When it hits this point, it creates an eddy. And this is a really good spot for the bass to hang out, waiting for things like shad and bait fish and food in general to come beat up against that wall. Another thing that I find with a lot of points is that there's an underwater point associated with it as well. So you need to pay attention to your electronics when you're looking at these bluff walls and these points, because there might be a bigger point extending below the surface, kind of a tip of the iceberg type thing. So these type of situations, those are going to be really, really key once you're on the vertical part of the bluff. Pockets are really good. Pockets are where during the spawn, I never miss throwing right into the back of a pocket, because those are really good areas to be able to, pick off a spawning fish or two. So the fish will spawn back here. A lot of bluegill tend to congregate in the backs of those pockets because they're sheltered and the current's not rolling all the time. So this is a really good spot. But a pocket also, oftentimes, just because of the nature of what creates the pocket, will have a rock pile associated with it, because essentially what a pocket is it's a area that was eroded from that bluff by the water, and whatever rock that was there that composed that pocket originally has fallen off, sheared off, and created a little rock pile below it. So again, use your forward-facing sonar. Whenever you see a pocket like that, use your electronics to be able to see whether or not it's there, and then make sure that you fish that structure. You're going to be fishing further out. So like I will go from fishing parallel with the structure to pulling out further from the bank and then casting to that rock pile. So this is a situation where I'll go from parallel to more 90-degree type presentation. So anyways, guys, those are some of the biggest keys to fishing bluffs. I think they're a great type of structure. I've caught a lot of fish on there. In fact, I had a couple tour events that I really got a big check because of the bluff wall. So anyways, guys, hopefully you found this very helpful. And if you have any questions or you want me to do a video on a certain topic, drop a comment below. Otherwise, make sure you like, share, subscribe if you like this content. I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.